Good afternoon and welcome to our virtual Community Speaks. We're very excited to have our community members with us this evening to provide us with some professional development, some insight, some wisdom, some learning and knowledge. And we would like to begin by asking Todd Jamieson to offer a smudge and John Samosi to offer up a prayer of thanks.
Megazenimanda, Wapema Bekwana Mendogo, Megazenimanda, Megazenimanda,
Thank you for beginning us in a great way. Thank you for starting this evening in a great way to clear our minds and our thoughts and allow us to be present of the learning that we have before us. And now the land acknowledgement.
We are gathered on the ancestral lands and waters of all Indigenous peoples who have left their footprints on Mother Earth before us. We respectfully acknowledge those who have walked on it, those who walk on it now, and future generations who have yet to walk upon it. We pray to the Creator for strength and wisdom that all may continue to serve as stewards of the earth.
And so the York Catholic District School Board is very excited to have our staff and also some PQP guests visiting with us this evening. I would like our community members to introduce themselves. First, we have Kathryn Edgecomb. Kathryn?
Good afternoon. Obviously, my name is Kathryn Edgecomb. I was a intermediate teacher, taught grades 7 and 8 English, history, and geography in Waterloo for 17 years. And I tried to bring as much First Nations education and perspective into what I'm doing. And you'll find out more about me when I read my poetry.
Thank you, Kathryn. And John Samosi?
Hello, I'm John Samosi. I'm Métis from Saskatchewan. I've been learning about Native traditions for 30 years and been working with this school board for several years now and have a very good relationship with it. And thanks to Kathryn, I've been going into the school boards around Ontario for about 18 years.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks. And Todd Jamieson.
Hi, John. Hi, Kathryn.
Hi.
I'm Todd Jamieson. I am Haudenosaunee, an Oneida of the Thames near London, Ontario. Artist, presenter, and I come into the schools teaching history and culture through art, through storytelling, and through history. And also been doing it since about 2007 with the York Catholic School Board.
Thanks, Todd.
You're back. Hi, Lou.
And Lou Panessa.
Hi, my name is Lou Panessa, and I'm the Student Success Specialist for York Catholic District School Board. I have been honored to work with Shannon, who is our Indigenous lead, and with Kathryn, John, and Todd, who have not only increased my knowledge, but helped me gain a better appreciation of all of their contributions and the contributions of Indigenous peoples in Canada. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this event and a part of all the learning that I've experienced over the last few years with you.
Thanks, Lou. And my name is Shannon Oljati. I am the Indigenous lead, and I have the privilege to working with all of these wonderful people that you see in front of you. Their talent, their wisdom, their insight, their patience, their humor has enlightened my life. Not only are they colleagues, but I call them friends. And so we are looking at, and we've been talking about how to continue this wonderful kind of learning that we have had at the York Catholic District School Board during this time of distance learning. And so this is our first, hopefully not our last, but our first virtual kind of PD, virtual community speak. And so we're excited about what we have to offer. And Kathryn, John, and Todd have worked very, very hard at kind of coming up with some ideas and wisdoms and offerings that they'd like to share with you this evening. So I'd like to introduce, I'd like to ask Lou to speak about questions and the process of asking questions. So Lou.
Thank you very much, Shannon. So if you're with us, if you joined us using the Google Meet link, then by all means, ask your questions in the chat box. And if you are joining us using the live stream, you also have the opportunity to do so. So I've noticed a number of my PQP students there and other guests. By all means, ask your questions. We'll be monitoring the chat box in both areas and trying to get to your questions towards the later half of the program for this evening.
And you should also know that we have a couple of people behind the scenes helping us. We have Rob Canone, who is working on all of the streaming and all of the putting together this live stream presentation. And we've got Marco Belvedere that's answering the questions that are in the Google Meet. So it is a group effort, and we're very lucky to have this team approach. So I'd like to invite Kathryn to present her poetry, her insights, her wonderful kind of sense of community and offering through her poetry. So I'd like to offer Kathryn. Kathryn?
Thank you. So while I was teaching, one of the things that was very important to me is to be inclusive, to make sure that we didn't separate out any culture, because we all come from a culture. So I love teaching poetry. I'm a poet. I write poetry, and I'm going to read you some of my poetry. And so when I taught poetry, especially when I was focusing on culture, I tried to do a 5-step program. So the first one is culture is transmitted by family stories. So this is one that I would read to my students. Lizzie Martin. I thought of you today, this great grandmother I never knew, not a hint, except like a misty dream, images would come to my child's mind. I spent my life looking for spirit, redemption, churches filled with someone else's faith, wise people's words pointing to shadows outside my line of imagination. Nature became my sanctuary. Alone by creeks, water sang me areas. Clouds mingled with my tears. Trees became my savior. Later, I danced with women by full moonlight, our prayers and our bowls of water, offered to the night and to one another, dancing barefoot on dew dusted grass. Almost home, but never quite. Echoes found teaching in northern Ontario, hints led held in elders' words, sweat lodges and feasting grounds, me, a missed fit. Visitors in my dreams told me in tongues I didn't understand to follow setting sun west, to hot, flat prairie days, to dance with creation, to learn creation always loves me. My father's last gift, one brief sentence from stroke silenced tongue. He smiled. We have Indians in our family. He smiled again, nodded, and disappeared. Soon after my father dies, I sit with my older brother, ask him, "Do you know of First Nations in our family?" "Yes," he says. "Our great grandmother was Cree from Red River. Years ago, when you were wee and our father's father lived with us, he told me secrets." So I would also then ask uh, students to share their traditions because we all have traditions no matter what culture we come from. So, and so here's one about tradition prayers. Do you bow your head when you pray, or do you look up into blue space? Mary Oliver. For more than one long year, each evening I collected twigs and small branches from under the canopy of a startlingly large black walnut tree which sheltered the whole of this small backyard. Arranged them into a teepee shape with shards of dry leaves and tiny twigs and a pinch of tobacco inside, touched by a lit match, the little bundle of debris became a small dancing flame. Holding more tobacco in my hand, the day unfolded before my mind's eye, replaying the things that were said, making a difference in some young person's life, and the ones needing an apology first thing the next morning. Comments put in tobacco entered the fire with determination to do better on the morrow. A presentation of gratitude to all those who helped on the journey that life is, remembering the living and the ones passed on. Before the fire danced images of parents, grandparents, children, lovers, and other wanderers, company on this journey. They're all remembered. Thanks given for their unintended gifts. Prayers for all of creation entered another pinch of tobacco and released into the little flame a conscious act. Prayers are magic of intention. And then, as you can see,
Beautiful.
there's an image here of a soft sculpture that was given to me at one point. And she inspired when I teach this stuff. I'm looking to help my students find the things in their culture that inspires them and to understand that First Nations kids have their culture. We all have a culture, and they're not all exactly the same, and one is not better than the other. So this is my poem. Great grandmother, white hair caught in a bun, cheekbones high, softly wrinkled brown skin. She kicks up her moccasined foot, steps to the sound of the drum. In her weathered hand, an eagle headed cane. She dances for the young she will leave behind, the old ones gone before. She's not alone. She moves around the arbor, dancers in regalia like brightly plumed birds circle around her age, raise their fans, clear her path. Ancestors greet her as she passes the western door, an invitation to join them deferred another day. Her beads swing gracefully, her old shawl sways with each step. She sings ancient prayers, calling old ones to join her for one last dance. So that's objects. And I invite students to bring in their objects. And then there's traditions, of course. We all have traditions. Oops. Sorry, I grabbed the wrong one. Already did that one. Okay, music. Music is an important thing in every culture around the world. So this one goes like this: heartbeat rhythm, hard, soft, hard, soft. Waya, heya, waya, heya, waya, ho. Sweat lodge so dark and hot and moist. Life glances off my face a blow. I want to run away and hide, but women's voices sing. Big buffalo drum beating on and on, echoing Mother Earth's heartbeat, its birthing song. I grow roots in cold, wet ground. Our stories blend until it's us. Ancestors come through the western door, 7 generations. For me, a place within creation. Our heart beats with the drum. Miigwech nokamas, aho. And one last one. Uh, it's important to find inspiration in other poets when you're writing poetry. So I always would find uh, poems written by First Nations people to share. This one is more for adults. Um, Letters to a Blank Page, inspired by 77 fragments of a familiar ruin by Thomas King. Thomas King is one of Canada's uh, top writers and also a friend of ours. So I was reading his book one morning, and this is what I thought. Every morning I read the magic laid on a page by some wise poet. I search for my own lexicon. I read on until a glistening idea wakes my imagination and drives me for my pen to record my own conceit. Then I pause, take another sip from this favorite ceramic coffee mug, and watch the brilliance of someone else's words skitter mine blown like dust. But I grasp for them as they dribble onto this page and reform into my poetic thoughts. I clutter these lines while this beautiful planet burns and drowns. I cry, hold my granddaughter close, make promises. We build childhood memories, slide down snowy hills, tip the toboggan as if playing childish games. And it's a path back to reason. Thank you.
Oh, I have goosebumps. Kathryn, you spoke of magic and culture and tradition and story and all of the vivid imageries that were dancing through my mind as you were reading and kind of pouring out your soul, your heart into your words on your page. And they were more than just words. Gratitude, traditions, prayer, culture, where we've come from, your favorite coffee mug. I mean, we all have our favorite coffee mug. Thank you so much, Kathryn. Miigwech, I was very touched that you chose to share this poetry with us. And your talent is beautiful. Just gives me goosebumps.
Aho.
Thank you.
Mhm.
What I especially appreciate is just the insight into the writer's mind, and how you describe your inspiration and how sometimes your inspiration is tied into a fellow poet's work, or sometimes into an object that inspired you to write the poetry. So thank you for that insight into the writer's craft of your work.
And I love teaching poetry to kids because it is a way into feelings. And I had this one boy one day, he said, I can't write a poem. I said, what do you do? He said, I play hockey. What do you like about hockey? And each sentence, each question, I'm wrote down, and then I had him read it, and he went, "That's a poem." And so poetry is a way to our hearts, I think, our souls. Okay, thank you.
And making that connection. Once a teacher, always a teacher there, Kathryn.
Oh, yeah. It's my superpower.
I'd now like to invite John for a presentation. I think John's going to talk about, well, I'll allow John to speak about what he's going to talk about.
Hi, I'm going to talk about stuff.
We appreciate your humor.
Yeah, I'm a Wendigo con in the native culture traditions, and it translates as sacred clown. So we use humor for healing and for guidance and a whole bunch of stuff. So that's why I enjoy what I do. But there's a whole bunch of background that goes into these things. Like you say pipe carrier, and it's 2 words, but it's countless hours of sitting down in ceremonies, in the snow, in the heat, sun dancing, piercing your skin. It's sitting in talking circles and sweat lodges and hours of sitting and listening and fasting and years and years and years of understanding before you pick up the pipe, and then years and years and years of understanding what that pipe means. So it is a culmination of many, many years of learning. And so there's some very simple basic teachings. And I guess it's kind of like when you're a teacher and you say these words in English, there is a vast experience that you have that not necessarily your students have.
Yeah.
And so, so I'll keep it kind of simple and basic. Physically, being a pipe carrier, you do ceremonies from birth to death to weddings to all of those things, and you're kind of like a mouthpiece for the ancestors, and it's the ancestors that are the boss, that are driving things, and we're just showing up, interpreting or saying what they say. And there's years and years of sitting down and looking at ego, because when you're a pipe carrier, you really can't have a lot of ego because it's the ancestor driving everything. So I did a pipe yesterday or the day before, and I was sitting down and I was thinking, I haven't been in a sweat lodge for many months, and what am I missing? What am I missing? I love the cleansing of it, and what I got was humility. And humility, when we go into sweat lodges, we say we're weak and pitiful human beings, and it's the ancestors that teach us, that sacrificed everything so I could learn. So some of the learning is the physical aspect of a pipe, the physical pipe. So this is part of the Pawagan. We call Pawagan in Ojibwe. And this is the female aspect of life. So this is where the stem goes in. And we load up the tobacco in the bowl, and then we light it up. So here's the stem. That's the male part. Balance of life is the male and the female part joined together. And we load it with tobacco. Tobacco's prayers. Tobacco, I've been doing this stuff for 30 years, but I haven't reached an understanding or a depth of what tobacco is. because it's a connection, it's a prayer, it's a promise, it's a contract between human beings and the physical world and the spiritual world. And this, when we put this together and we smoke and we light this and we think about our prayers and we're praying as we're smoking, we're not actually inhaling the tobacco, we're just letting it go into our mouth and then blowing it out up to the creator. It's a very deep thing. It's a very strong connection with creation. And a lot of people go all over the place looking for that connection. And the simple thing is that you could be outside or in a quiet room and you just let your mind be and be open for what's around you, whether it's trees or animals or the wind or the water. It resonates within your soul. So, yeah. So, so there's no real easy answer of what is a pipe carrier. A pipe carrier is a connection to creation. The pipe is a connection to creation and into the spirit world, because we understand as Native people and that the spirit world, the separation of reality and the spirit world is very, very thin. And our ancestors are around us all the time. And they're watching us and they're laughing at us, or sometimes they give us heck. And the pipe carriers whittle down that separation between the spirit world and the physical world. And we're open to that reception of those messages and that connection. And being human beings, you have better days than others. You have a better connection than others. Some days your humanness, your imperfections hold you from reaching that connection. But that's what the ceremonies are, is to break down those barriers of disconnection, of separation. So you could live the way the original teachings share with us for this physical aspect of our lives. And it's a very deep connection. How much time did I use on that?
So, John, during this time of separation, so many of us have been or felt separated from a loved one, from an event, from a favorite restaurant, from something. I think we can all kind of connect to that kind of breaking down barriers that separate us. And I think moving forward, a lot of us aren't going to take for granted, some of those things that we felt we had to participate in. Now we're craving to participate in, because those barriers that kind of had separated us are now seen as something that we crave, that we miss, that we're longing for. I think what touched me the most was when you said, let your mind just be. And it's such an important lesson for all of us to learn, that we need to take time to listen, to be with ourselves, to let our mind just be. And by listening, maybe we will find that balance. Maybe we will find that humility. Maybe we will find that understanding. And maybe we'll be able to experience our humanness. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, John. I just want to make a point that came up in one of the live streams. Thank you for articulating so clearly to us how ceremonies are used to break down the barriers to attaining a more spiritual connection. And I guess the thing that really impressed me or really resonated with me is the idea that there's so much more to learn, sometimes in the simplest of things, and not to take anything for granted, because, even after 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, there's something more to be learned. And so that whole aspect of being a continuous learner, of really digging deeply into your soul and your spirit and finding that connection. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing those insights.
Thank you, John. That was without humor. That's the serious I think I've ever seen you ever. That's. I think that was the largest impact on me too. Wow.
Well,
This is
actually another comment that I think is worth to make is Nalita says, love the comment that the smoke goes from the mouth up to the creator.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Oh, and being a pipe carrier is not like it doesn't make me more than anything. It doesn't make me more important. It doesn't make me more than anything at all. And that's the whole working on ego and I and it and all of that stuff.
That's the humility part of it. And I felt that as you were explaining that. I felt the humility part of being a pipe carrier through your eyes, through your wisdom, through your words. So thank you. Todd, my friend Todd. Todd is going to speak to us about wampum.
Good afternoon. Wampum for us is a history. Today we're going to have a small history lesson based on the wampum, what it means, what it represents. It was our history books. We didn't use writing. We didn't use the idea of a book. Ours was done through illustration. So in this wampum, they are made from a shell. Now, traditional wampum to the Haudenosaunee people, my people, is made from I don't know where's the best place to show that, the Atlantic quahog shell. Now, it's a clam, and you can see that there is a ridge of outside purple and white within that clam. This is where the wampum belts derive their colors, white and purple. Now, to the Haudenosaunee people, these histories, it's not just a book, it's a way of life. It's who we are. It's an understanding. Purple representing strife, fire, energy. The white representing peace, tranquility, the people. So in a belt, to understand the belt, you have to understand the shell. You have to understand what the colors mean. Now, the Hiawatha belt, if we can go back to the first one, thank you. The Hiawatha Wampum Belt is the record of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is over 700 years old. Now, in our tradition, when agreements were made, these belts were put together to symbolize those stories, those events. Now, the Hiawatha Wampum Belt very simply represents the 5 initial nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The 5 nations. We are now 6, the Tuscarora inducted in 1840. That original belt is more to it. There is more story. There is more legend. But that belt tells that story. To understand the belt, you need to understand the history, the story of who it is, who we are. the peacekeeper and his prophet Hiawatha, who the belt was named after. The great tree of peace in the center of the wampum belt, showing the Onondaga Nation and where we planted that peace. Story tells that we planted all our weapons underneath that sacred pine tree so that these 5 nations would never fight again amongst each other. Now, to us, it's a very important means. Once it's put in a belt, it's law. It's life itself. So to us, it's a trust. That confederacy is still in effect 750 years later. We are still a confederacy here. History, not history, but communities today, the United States, Canada, have modeled their parliaments, their governments around our governments. The idea of representation by populace. It's the model of our politics is how the countries in here in North America run. So if we could move to the next one, that's one of the oldest belts in our history. Now, the 2-row wampum was made in about 1613, and it was this was a treaty signed between the Haudenosaunee Nation and the Dutch in Upper New York State. Again, the representation of this belt being white beads mostly meant they were doing things in peace. They were coming in peace. It was about tranquility. The 3 equal representations on that belt, meaning truth. The middle one meaning friendship, and the third one, the meaning of the 3rd row is forever. Those are the 3 main aspects of that belt. Now, the 2 purple ones running parallel to each other, those are our 2 nations. The Haudenosaunee Nation running one way in our canoe, the Dutch coming down the St. Lawrence River in the other, in their boats. Now, the idea of this 2-row wampum meant that we could forever live in peace as long as we do not cross or try to steer the other person's boat. It's about tranquility. It's about friendship. It is about peace. Again, these belts to us were more than just books. We have made a sacred pact by doing this. Unlike most written treaties, we do not believe that we can break these. As long as the belts are intact and as long as the ideas of the belts, we also believe that is true for who we are. With regular treaties, one person you can have them changed. You go to government, you change them, or you just don't honor them, and that has happened too many times to us. So to see that belt, the 2-row wampum, is still in existence and we still live by it is a testament to who we are and the importance of these belts to us as a people. That's it. Quick history.
It's I think we can, even though history informs our future, it's information from our past, I think there's lots we can learn, right? Never fight again. Look at how many, either
I don't know how many other nations have that. I mean, there have been so many in our past. Every country, every government gets overthrown. Ours has not. 750 years later.
Yep.
We're still honor those treaties. So.
The idea of honor, peace, tranquility, a sacred pact, a trust. I mean, these are lessons that we can take today and should use. And our students should hear this and use this and know this and have this knowledge because it's great learning, right? Like you said, over 700 years ago. And as you were talking, I have to honestly say that there's a wonderful connection here as I see the tree in the Hiawatha wampum, the tree of peace. When I see it, I think of, I think of Kathryn's poetry, of John's insight about, going to nature and just finding that moment and listening. And then I look at that treaty, and it has that tree, that foundation, the grounding, the roots, the tree of life, right? Lou, any comments?
Yeah, just a couple. I just want to point out a couple from the live stream. Such meaningful representations of history, pride, and sacred symbols entwined in these belts. Love that pride, culture, and traditions are passed down and celebrated in this way. Beautiful. Thank you, Audrey, for that comment. Hannah, the solidarity among the nations is a model for all of humanity. So thank you so much for that comment, Hannah. And Ajua, wow, I did not know the history of the governments modeling themselves from this. A question for you from me, Todd, is the belts. Would people wear the belts? Is that something that you would wear on your person, or?
No, they're called belts just because of the way they're shaped. It looks like a belt. Now this is a replica belt, of course. It's not made from quahog, but it's a way to keep that packed. So they would keep it, fold it. That is a permanent record of that treaty or of that story or of that that historical event. So when a belt is written, it's now kept. This became our books. To read the book, you open it and you understand by the colors, by the shapes, by what they are. It's the story.
Yeah.
So it's not truly a belt. It is used it's only called that because of the shape that they're sewn in.
Awesome. And you know what, and that's excellent, because I mean it's a different way to represent culture and meaning and knowledge from just the written word. So I think in that it's a very powerful expression of of a lot of meaning.
Yeah. Well, and in those belts, the actual beads, and I don't know if you can see that in my fingers. I'll try
Yes.
this way. That is a single bead made from one shell. You can only make one bead from a shell. Now, they say it would take from 1 day to 2 days to make one bead. Now, the Hiawatha wampum belt, I don't know the exact, but there are hundreds of those beads on that. So to make that, 30 people may have been sat and making beads for 30 days, 40 days to have enough to say, here, we'll build that belt. It's the amount of work that goes in. It's the amount of understanding to make that bead, which makes them so important to us. They are our treasures. Because
each one takes so long to make. Right. Yeah. So yes, for sure. Now a question, I know I'm jumping ahead in terms of a question, but I think it's topical now. Where are the belts stored, and how are these historical events recorded and passed down to future generations?
It's unfortunate. Most of the original belts were taken by colonial leaders. The wampum was considered money after the colonials came because of the difficulty in getting the beads. So they considered it money. They would trade to get those original belts. That's why replicas are now. Most are now in museums, and they are kept. Some of the original ones are left with the clan mothers on the separate territory. Some of the Mohawk clan mothers have some of the original treaty beads. They're also not just belts. Some are strings of beads. Some are to tell them the stories of each clan and who they are. So, I mean, there are so many, but traditionally they are kept by the clan mothers. And then it's been unfortunate that the big belts, which were treaties between us and the colonials, were generally stolen and taken.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here. I really appreciated the explanation of the wampum. I've read Hiawatha and the Peacemaker, a children's book. Was Hiawatha a real person? Can you explain a little bit more about Hiawatha?
He was a prophet to the peacekeeper. He was the one. He was the leg man. He was the one that, in our stories about them, he was the one that paddled the canoe that carried Peacemaker to the nations. He was the leg man. He was the right hand man to the peacekeeper, and it was the peacekeeper whose idea of peace brought the Six Nations together, the Five Nations. So Hiawatha was a real person, a prophet, who initiated peace underneath the peacemaker.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I guess, Shannon, unless we've got a little bit more to this first part, we can move on to the next portion of our time together, which is taking some questions. So I'm going to open it up to the whole panel, and if we can get Rob to post the first question for us. Okay, so the first question is how may we use Indigenous teachings regarding respect for nature and incorporate these values into our eco-school initiatives and in our grade 9 Canadian geography curriculum?
I'll start right just from speaking about when we're talking about the Canadian geography curriculum, the governments using the models of the Haudenosaunee people, the Anishinaabe people also. It's a model for how we live today. As much as most don't understand it or believe it, it's a model of how we lived long before they were here. So we to continue and learning to understand that is education for our children today.
Awesome. Okay, so next question. What can I do as a Catholic teacher to further foster a community that allows students of Indigenous background to share their culture and identity in the classroom and around the school?
I can talk about that.
Yeah, go for it.
In my classrooms, one of the things that I found at the beginning of the year, I would say, is there anyone here of Indigenous ancestry? And almost never did anyone put up their hand. And then because I created a safe place in the classroom by doing things like those poems where you take, where you show the students, both the Indigenous students and any cultural distinct group, all of us come from some sort of culture. We have beliefs, we have rituals, we have music. And by the students being able to see each other's cultures, first I would have a student come to me and say, I have Indigenous ancestry. And as the year went on, by creating a place where everybody felt comfortable with their cultural identity, they began to be able to respect other people, other students' cultural identities. And I think that's really important, to make those bridges so that we don't separate out anybody, so.
No, that's great. Yeah, and I like how you're focusing on, everyone comes from a culture, and that you're creating a safe space for people to express that culture. So that's a fantastic way of approaching it. Todd, John, Shannon, any of you want to add to that piece?
Yeah, I do. One, I have been in a lot of classes.
No.
Their Indigenous studies. The do not.
Well, Todd, you're kind of cutting in and out.
Okay.
This is actually the only place in the world where we could actually, freeze Todd. Oh, he'll be back. Oh, there you go. Do you want to try that again?
No.
Many of our people today, and it's also why we have trouble self-identifying.
I've lost touch with it.
To be able to stand up and give that in front of a classroom. They don't know enough about their own cultures, and that goes for all people, not just our not just First Nations people. So to put a young a student in on the hot seat like that about, oh, is that how it happens? It's detrimental. It doesn't work. It doesn't make it actually turns them off.
Yeah, you don't do that in a classroom, though.
Yeah.
If a teacher does that in a classroom, they shouldn't be in a classroom.
Agreed.
There's also stages of learning and understanding where there's a whole bunch of information you had no idea that was there, and then you start learning about the truth of the whole systemic racism, the whole history of eradication and sterilization, and residential school, and then one of the stages is anger. So there's going to be anger and outrage, and how could this happen? And then it goes past that. So and then how do you change it? How do you get rid of the systemic racism? How do you deconstruct your own understanding about a society so you could replace it with something better? And that's where we're at. How are we going to replace it with something better?
Before I started doing these presentations in school, I was asked by a gentleman that I worked with, what can we do? What is the most important thing that we can do to change the way things are going? And the first thing he came up is education. And he looked at me and says, right, we need to educate the Native people. They need to get educations. I said, no, we need to educate you about who we are and where we're going and where we're going to be. And the biggest problem I know, and it's been almost 15 years, we're still just touching the tip of the iceberg to that. There are still so much time. Like the old proverb, it took us 500 years to get here since the Europeans landed on our shores to where we are now. It will not turn around in 5 minutes. It's not going to turn around in 15 years. It will take us 500 years to get back to that. So teaching someone about culture and about who we are and having them understand it. At the time when you're listening, they hear it. Yes. By the time they go home and they hear something else that their parents didn't understand or were not told, they forget it. And I find that very often in the classrooms I go in. So it's a matter of continued education that we turn around.
Yeah, I hear you. And I like the piece that resonated here is helping kids understand themselves and their culture so they can understand other cultures. And you know what, I agree with you. Having been a classroom teacher for many years, you teach the same things over and over and over again, and you wonder how they forgot it from one year to the next. But it's worth the repetition. It's worth helping students get ready to understand at a deeper level, and that takes time. Hopefully not 500 years, Todd. Okay, but I think it's worth. I think it's worth bearing the repetition and going at it time and time again. So thank you all for your fantastic answer there. So next question. What tips can you provide to teach? What tips can you provide to help teach students about the importance of connection and healing of the mind in this fast-paced world? How do we foster that humility in our students? A big question, yeah.
Huge question. I believe, honestly, our society isn't built that way. When you see everybody is fast, even we're guilty of it ourselves. Getting ready for today. 2 minutes. We were rushing around. That has become the norm. It's not the way it used to be. Before, when you're hungry, it's time to eat. That's all. When you're tired, well, then you go for a nap. Now we are so regimented in what we, lunch is at 12. They'll work till 3. get home, cook dinner, take the dog for a walk, and then start all over again. It is so systematic now that I think it's hard to break that. And we've all been raised with it, from the time we were small. Even our own cultures, my father was a military man. So when he came out of the military, went to work, he's off to work, get me dressed to the daycare, boy, 7:00 on to get in the car, let's over here. And we are taught that from a young age already now. So that question, I don't know the tips. I know I try and teach my kids that, timetables are only timetables as long as you follow them. That's all.
Well, if go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, John.
When we go out to do ceremonies, if we do a fasting, it's 4 days.
Yep.
And sometimes the 4 days gets extended to 7 days and then to 10 days to 14 days. And nobody's plugged into anything in those 14 days. So this, I talk about it in one of the video clips I did, that the society is based on 10 images a second. And nobody can concentrate for more than a second without having 10 images a second put at them. And that's not reality. People try to say it's the new reality, but it has nothing to do with reality. It's a made thing. It's unnatural.
Yeah.
So, and people will find that out on their own.
Yeah. Well, if I could make an observation that really, really sticks out for me is, through Kathryn's poetry, through the knowledge you shared, John, with us regarding being a pipe carrier, through, your response, Todd, through what you've described in terms of, the painstaking care it makes to make even one bead. I think really it's about being present in the moment is what it is. And, you are absolutely right. We are in a society of 10 images a minute, maybe even more these days. But fast paced, schedules and deadlines. And, but I think the lesson to learn from what you're sharing with us today is just being present in the moment and being aware of the moment and how we're feeling and what we are learning and what we can learn. You're kind of modeling for us how, we can work with our students in our classrooms. So thank you so much for that. Next question. Is it hurtful when so much work goes into the creation of a wampum belt and the agreement isn't honored after the fact?
It's funny. I was doing a small a class about this, and the best way I can explain it to you is: do you have everyone here has a best friend in the whole world, and between the two friends you exchange a bracelet. Your best friends are going to be best friends forever, and then your friend lies and cheats on you. Do they stay your best friend? That's what these belts are to us. When we have that in our belts, the treaties and the understandings between those belts were like, we were stepping into a relationship with someone through these belts. To have them broken, to have them not honored, it's like your best friend lying and cheating on you. That's the best way that I can explain it. So to have those treaties, to have those things not honored today, even still, of course it's hurtful. I don't know how we change that as a whole. To honor those, to honor the idea that we shouldn't be interfering in each other's lives. Can we do that now? I don't know. I don't know with the way society runs, the way things have been made because of the racism that is alive and well here today. I don't know that can be honored. So those ideals are lost. I think people want them to be, and I think people want to feel those ideals. I don't know that they can. I don't know that it's in us to do that anymore. I hate to be like that. I would love to be the ever optimist to say, yes, we can. Let's fight harder for. I don't know that it's. I mean, 1613, and it didn't take long for the Dutch to try and steer our canoes. As you know, it's what the way the story goes. So
Yeah.
it's I don't know. Of course, it's hurtful. I don't know where we go from here. The Haudenosaunee people still honor those belts. Every year, there's a reading of the Two-Row Wampum in New York State where it's trying to remind those this was the agreement. Let's honor those agreements. So we are still trying to honor those.
John, Kathryn? You were smiling before. I'm just giving you an opportunity to speak. That's all.
The only thing we got is the future.
Right.
And so what do we do in the future? Are we going to keep up with this Indian Act? Are we going to keep up with Indian and Northern Affairs? Are we going to keep the money that was held by the government through natural resources? Are we going to give any of that money back to Native people? Is there a reason why there's bad water, there's no housing, when there's trillions of dollars that belong to Native people in Ottawa? There should absolutely be no poverty. There should be no hunger. There should be no lack of education. There should be no police on the reserve beating the people, killing the people. So we have to take down these things and replace it with something not damaging.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For me,
go ahead, Kathryn. Yeah,
for
go
me,
ahead.
I think of the state of the world and how things are going and what our kids are constantly being fed on television and whatever, movies, whatever. And that's why I think education is so important, and that we do whatever it is we can to help students realize there are other options. And maybe it won't show up right now, but maybe later on, when faced with two things, they can make the right choice. That's, for me, that feels like about almost the only way that we're going to get change is that, and just gradually one student at a time.
Okay. And I think, what, the pieces that resonate with me in your answers is, that originally we entered into this relationship. Was it hurtful? Yes, because, when one side doesn't, understand the value of the relationship, when one side doesn't honor that relationship, then yes, for sure, it's hurtful. And you know what, I really do appreciate your honesty and really framing what that relationship was about. Moving forward, I think Todd, you said, and John, you were getting there too, building something better. And what I'm observing from your answer as well is that, you're still there. The relationship is still there, and you're honoring that relationship. And I think that, the work that needs to happen is for us to come back into that relationship, recognize the value of the relationship, and, and start doing the work of re-engaging and honoring, what was established so many years ago. And, what I've always, we've had some of these conversations before, and what I really find most impressive about the three of you is not just your talent, it's not just your passion, it's not just your knowledge, but your openness and your willingness to just embrace us and to bring us back and to forgive. And And that, I think, is what really impresses me about the three of you, especially working with us at Your Catholic and with our students and with our teachers, and being willing to be a part of this. I think I just wanted to get that one question, because I really like that one question about Canadian youth, if we can pop that up. So just to sort of wrap up our questions for today, what is your message for Canadian youth?
We have a future.
We have a future.
Our youth is the future. They're the ones that will be able to change the way things are now. They are the new teachers, the new doctors, the new lawyers, the new politicians. It's their voice that's going to be heard, not, it's their voices, not just repeating or parroting what they hear from other people now.
And
So
they have the power, that they're powerful.
Yeah. Then they have to say, Kathryn, say that again, because it bears worth repeating.
That they're powerful. They have the power. They have all of the power. They just have to use it. And that doesn't mean it's easy. There's a lot of really hard work and a lot of disappointments, but you just keep going. You just pick up your feet and keep going.
In the history of Canada, in Ontario, this is the first time that they're paying Native people to talk about Native issues and Native teachings. First time in history. We are living in history, and we change the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And just sort of to wrap this up, what I think is a really powerful idea is the idea that, sometimes we need to feel a little bit uncomfortable in our discussions, a little uncomfortable in uncovering the truth in order to get to a comfortable place, or in order to get to a place of understanding and acceptance and forgiveness. So, I want to thank you all very much, not only for sharing your knowledge and your talents and for your insights, but for, helping us be a little uncomfortable so that we can get to that place of understanding and knowledge. So, from my end of things, thank you so very much. I'm going to throw it back to Shannon, who will wrap up our session today.
You talked about being present. And so the other term is that you're present to us. John, Kathryn, Todd, like I said in the beginning, you're not only our friends, but we welcome your wisdom, your insight, your passion, your tenacity in helping us kind of walk this future path so we can empower our students with voices, with knowledge, with kind of the passion to make the change, to walk forward. We appreciate your time, your gifts. We know how much you have to add, and you add to our curriculum, to our classes, to our insight, to our growth. I'm a little speechless because Lou did such a wonderful job in pulling everything together, and I was sitting here thinking, what am I going to take from this? And gratitude, humility, balance, friendship, peace, creation, stories, that we're all connected and we all have a history, and 700 years, never to fight again. And so my hope is that all the people who participated this evening take one of these wonderful offerings that you've made, you've gifted us with. And that's why the word present, that gift, you've gifted us with your presence. And so I'd like to thank you for that. And to end this evening, I think, and John, if I'm mistaken, you can correct me, but I think you were going to send us off on a song, and you were going to explain the meaning, or somebody was going to explain the meaning of the traveling song. And even though we're sitting here in a virtual presentation, the song still holds that well wishes, that offering as we go in our separate directions.
He likes to ask me how the song goes so that I remember again.
So this is kind of like the final hug and a prayer and a wish that everybody is gets home and everything is well at home.
Safe journeys.
And safe journey. Yeah.
That heartbeat.
Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh, Bamo piki wap nemo, bamo piki wap nemo, bamo piki wap nemo, eh, ah, eh, ah, eh, oh. Eh, ah, eh, ah, eh, oh. Eh, ah, eh, ah, eh, oh. Way, ah, eh, ah, eh, oh, way, ah, eh, ah, eh, oh. Bamo piki wap nemo, bamo piki wap nemo, bamo piki wap nemo, way, ah, eh, ah, eh, oh. Bumblebee.
Beautiful. And I feel that great big virtual hug as you send us all off into our own little virtual homes. I'd like to thank you all again. I'd like to thank, behind the scenes, Rob Canone, who has been instrumental in putting this all together. Marco Belvedere, who's taking some of the comments from the stream, and I'd like to thank everybody that it's taken the time to attend this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So saying that, miigwech, and good evening, goodbye, and we hope to maybe do this yet again and hope you tune in. So take care.
So long. You, Abnam.